Yeah, so good morning again, Comrade Chido.
Good morning.
Yeah, so on this episode of the podcast, we thought to talk about um, the ongoing left digitization of left archives, you know, um, and it's a project that's been ongoing now for some time. So we thought, to discuss at least one of those projects with Comrade Chido, since he's been actively involved in um, something called SOLAR, that's the Socialist Library and Archives project. Um, I don't know how to begin to introduce Comrade Chido, but I guess I would leave a large chunk of that to him, to do justice to. But I think that the one thing that there is to say, at least from my own point, how I came in contact with his work, is that he's a very strong member of the Nigerian Left. I think I came, to meet him, through his works with, stories about, his days, as in the University of Calabar. He's also an author, published author. But like I said, I think Comrade Chido will be in a best position to do a better job of that. The other thing to add is that he's also part of the board of SOLAR, the archive that we will be looking to get, to discuss and learn, about the work that's ongoing there. So, Comrade Chido.
Yeah, thank you very much, Comrade. It's a pleasure to be here. I think the best way to do the introduction is to not do the introduction. I mean, my name is Chido Onumah, and I think that suffices. An author, journalist, very active in the civil society space, but my real passion. I was at a conference at the University of Michigan just last week, and I did a presentation on the library project. And, when I got up to speak, I told, so people were expectedly, I think even the panel, the chair of the panel had done some extensive background work on me, and when she did the introduction, she was talking about the fact that apart from being a journalist, and I've also done a lot of, I'm an author of many books and so on. So when I started talking, I said something to the effect that, yeah, in my former world, I was a journalist and author, and 3 years ago, I reincarnated. I'm an archivist and librarian. So for me, the passion, I really, this is something I'm excited about working on these archives, because I do a lot of reading and research, and sometimes I'm pained that I can't have access to materials that I need to enhance my study, my work, my research. And then this opportunity to create a platform to provide the missing link for researchers, activists, and so on. It's something that excites me beyond measure. So if there is any introduction to be done, simply say, oh, I'm either an archivist or digital archivist would suffice. And I think that works for the purposes of this program.
Very much so. So
Totally.
Thank you, Comrade, for making time.
Thanks, Comrade, for that introduction, but no introduction. Yeah, and you're right. You're right about you're introducing yourself mainly as an archivist, and it's important to the conversation that we're looking to have this morning. And you set it up beautifully, with that introduction. So I guess that the next, natural, question to ask is, for you to give us like a rundown of a brief rundown of the history of solar and how it came about. I'm aware that it had a life in something called C Street. So is it possible that you can help us tie, some of these aspects of what is today known as solar, for the benefit of our listeners?
All right, thank you very much. Again, just to restate what I said a few minutes ago about how important this project is to me, but not just to me and the board members who are some of our best and brightest and staunchest comrades on the left, those who have been in the trenches and have carried out revolutionary work. It's also important to the Nigerian left because one of the fundamental activities of this platform will be to document the writings and works and correspondences, letters and so on of prominent and perhaps not so prominent left activists in the country, the history of the Nigerian left, the history of progressive forces in Nigeria. To answer your question directly, Solar started essentially, say on May 15, 3 years ago, 2021, which was the 75th birthday of Comrade. I remember many years ago, and Comrade Comrades Eddie, it's the spouse that is Comrade Bene. Many years ago, Comrade Eddie had asked me, Calabar, for obvious reasons, is like a second home. I went to the University of Calabar as a young man in the mid-80s. And then Comrade Fate brought me and Comrade Bene together, who Comrade Bene then was a professor at the University of Calabar and was very active in the Academic Staff Union, ASU. I think she was the chair or secretary when we were at Calabar. And then through Comrade Bene, I got to know Comrade Eddie, was on the editorial board of The Guardian then. But even as a teenager, I had started reading Comrade Eddie. His Thursday column in The Guardian was a must-read for me. And I didn't know I would eventually form this lifelong friendship with him. But anyway, so through Comrade Bene, we used to have a weekly cell where we would study Marxist literature. It was on one of such visits that Comrade Bene invited us to come over for lunch at the family house, and then used the Comrade Eddie was coming to town. So she used the opportunity to introduce us to Comrade Eddie, and that was the beginning of a relationship spanning almost 4 decades that I've had with Comrades. And that made it easier for me. I would go to Lagos on holidays, and then the Guardian became home to me. Go to the Guardian, sit in Comrade Eddie's office, read his articles before they were published. I think Dr. Olatunji Dare was the chair of the editorial board of the Guardian, and when those first drafts came in printed form, I would read. The secretary would avail me the opportunity, and then I also then started dreaming of writing for the Guardian and so on. But yeah, then a few years ago, I would normally visit once or twice a year. I'll go to Calabar to see the Madunagu, and on one of such visits, Comrade Eddie, of course, I was involved in Sin Street from afar, the Calabar International Center for Information and Documentation, and then another project, Girls Power Initiative, that was run by Comrade Bene. Sin Street had its own signature project, which was CMA, conscientizing male adolescents. So while Comrade Bene was focused on empowering young girls, Sin Street, under the management of Comrade Eddie, was focused on conscientizing male adolescents, empowering them, but also educating them on a lot of issues, including patriarchy, gender roles in society, and all of that. So Sin Street had its own collection of materials. It kept a library, but also the fact that Comrade Bene and Comrade Eddie are great collectors, of course, for people who are very active, left scholars and activists. You can assume that collection of materials, reading and research, meticulously they kept all these documents over the years from their days. First, Comrade Eddie as a student at the University of Ibadan, and until they both met as graduate students at the University of Lagos. And those materials they brought to Calabar eventually when they settled in Calabar. And so Sin Street was using some of these materials, but also acquiring its own materials. So a few years ago, I went to Calabar after Sin Street had stopped work, and the library was just then there. The books, Comrade Eddie wasn't sure what they wanted to do with the books, and he mooted the idea that, oh, comrades, I've spoken to a few comrades, I was thinking of passing this material to some institutions. He mentioned, I don't want to, let me sound politically correct by not mentioning those institutions. So he mentioned them, and I said, oh, I don't think it's a good idea. And he said, why? He said, well, there is no history or record that these organizations you're mentioning can adequately protect these materials. I may be wrong, just that I don't know how effectively these organizations could be in terms of protecting this. And these are materials you couldn't find anywhere else. So we left the conversation. And of course, he had sounded a few people out also. I don't know what they said, but thankfully, he didn't carry through that thought or decision. And then 3 years ago, when he was going to turn 75, we decided, comrades, many of the comrades that were like mentees to him, decided, I coordinated it to hold like a Zoom conference. And that was when in the middle of the coronavirus pandemic, we decided to hold an online celebrations for him, bringing people together to celebrate him and so on. Then he had reached out to me that I was going to use the occasion to hand over his materials and those of Comrade Bene to the Nigerian Left. So it was just a general thing, good thing, and also knowing Comrade Eddie and how his knack for details. So he not only mentioned the fact that he was handing this over to the Nigerian Left, he suggested that he would like so and so people to manage the process. Myself, Comrade BJ, Yodu Comrade KK, Shola Oloriyomi, Femi Falano, and Ede Traore, and Kole Shetima, and so on. So we just reached out to those people, and they were on board. They liked the idea. And so he made the formal handover, writing and formally handing over the collection that he and Comrade Bene had, including also some of the acquisitions by Sin Street, spanning a period of 5 decades, if not more. So once that happened, what immediately came to my mind was the need to create a platform to bring all of this together. That it wasn't just enough that these materials will be given to the Nigerian Left. We needed to have something in place. And that was how, so after the birthday celebrations on May 15, we put together tributes and published a book that I edited. Some tributes to Comrade Edwin Madunagu at 75, and then formally constituted what has then become, or has now become, the board of Solar. Initially, so the first thing we needed to do was to formally register an organization that would then be the parent organization that would house all the collections and materials. We applied to the CAC back and forth for months over choice of name. Initially, we suggested Socialist Library and Archives of Nigeria, Solan, and they rejected that. Back and forth a number of names until finally we were running out of patience, but also not wanting to give up, and we suggested Socialist Library and Archive Solar, which they accepted and registered, and yes.
Yeah, Comrade, why do you think they rejected the Socialist Library and Archives of Nigeria? Did they not want to have socialism and Nigeria in the same title? Is that it? Or
I don't know, but it was also a conversation that went on within the group. I remember Comrade PJ Biodu, who is the chair of both the board of trustee and the governing board. He was livid when all the back and forth about suggestions of names, and nobody knew exactly why. So they would give this flimsy reason that, it's like Socialist Library and Archives of Nigeria, as if their argument, if I remember correctly, was that, this name won't be accepted because it means it's like Nigeria that has the library and archives.
Okay.
We're a library and archive in Nigeria, and then we can use that name. It's not, the government is not in the business of library and archiving. So
yes,
what's their own with? But yeah, that was when I spoke to the lawyer who was doing the registration. That was the very silly and funny excuse they gave that, oh, it means if we give the name, it means that it's Nigeria, that the library and archive belongs to Nigeria, or that is the Nigerian government that has the thing. So we agreed to look for change of name, toyed with several names, with some things around, but we also wanted to capture, I think, thanks to the insistence of the board chair, Comrade Chido Onumah, we didn't want to be coy or, afraid to use the term socialism. We wanted to ensure that that name reflected on this. A couple of names came up, of course, something around progressive library, but the team was unanimous in saying that let it be clear. Of course, we could archive and document other things, but the main purpose of this project, of this process, was to document lefts, socialists, and by extension, of course, Marxist materials and literature. But yeah, thankfully, when we agreed on the name Socialist Library and Archive, they accepted that, and then we registered that, did all the necessary papers and so on, and set up the website. So once we had that birthday celebration 3 years ago, things moved on quickly. We got the registration of the land, we set up the website. We weren't sure what we were going to do and how, because of course the question of resources was uppermost in the whole discussion. But we had a website, and then luckily for us, the library and archive is so well organized. The Comrade and the team in Calabar had put things, papers, materials, books. I mean, it just looks like a professionally run library, even though that wasn't. It's not the work of a librarian or professional, but because of their ideas or what they had in mind, they had arranged the materials, so letters, correspondences, magazines, reports, books on literature, history, and so on. They had arranged things in such a way that it made it easy for anybody who walked into the library or needed to do any work like we're doing in terms of archiving, easy for them. So the next step, of course, was to then find how to get this thing out to the public. We started thinking of digitizing this material. It was at the process, at the point of when the process of doing this, when CDD, thankfully, Comrade Said and IFRA approached us. And then it was just, everything just worked well. So we had started, one of the earliest things we did was to, even though the library and archive, the place was well organized, but we then put in additional efforts to so we started pulling out materials that we wanted to digitize, even though we didn't know where the money was going to come from or when it was going to start. But we started pulling out newspaper clippings, collecting, even with the collection that was in place, well organized, but then we still then made decisions, concrete decisions that, okay, these are the materials of Comrade Basi Ebubasi, Curtis Joseph, Ingrid Esenobo, Tesco Toyo, Bala Usman, and put them out. And thankfully, that was at that period that the whole IFRA CDD connection came up. So it was just easy to make the transition into digitizing to start the process formally. And yeah, that's where we are today. 2 years later, we're happy, proud of the work we've done, but also realizing that there's great opportunity for improvement, of course, and we're hoping we can do that.
Yeah. Wow. That's like an excursion back into the past, in a way that these stories are, in my view, the kind that you get only when you engage, the history of the Nigerian, left. And just listening to you is in fact infectious. And this is from the point of view of someone who is interested in an alternate history of Nigeria, from at least not the regular bit. And so it's nice to hear how far back you go to your time in Calabar and meeting with the Madunagus, and the relationship that then ensued between you and the Madunagus. But so the question, the way it pops to me, and that I'm trying, to frame it, is one gets the sense, that this collection, this archives, and listening to you, I also know that it's not restricted to just the work of, Comrades Eddie and Bene. It includes, like you mentioned, some of the work of Escort Toyo, Bala Osma. So it's something that has been our exchanges between some of these comrades and intellectuals at different, points in time, depending on what they were agitating against or fighting for. So I guess just because for us, I think most of the guys who listen in on the podcast are guys who are really quite young. I think more Gen Z than even millennials. And part of the problem is usually that the way I hear it from their own point of view is that even when they go searching, they don't find anything. And for those of them that are interested, and it's for this reason that I think it would help if you kind of, I know that you touched upon it, but in sequentially, what time frame, how far back does this combined library or even extended library of some of the other comrades that were part of the struggle, that their works that can be found, how far back would you say that this goes? I know that you kind of suggested in the mid 80s, I guess, but I generally have a sense that it probably goes back into the 70s. So I don't know if that's something that you can touch on briefly.
Yes, sure. So, and the library itself is work in progress. We're looking for suggestions and ideas on how to make it work better for everybody, whether it's for people who would decide to walk into the library or people who would want to access it from anywhere in the world. So it's divided into many parts. We're looking at individual subject matter, materials, that are not necessarily related to any individual or any subject. So maybe reports or magazines, many of them out of production or out of print. In terms of authors and subjects, as it is now, I think we just have about 10, but we also would expand that. We're starting with this initial 10, maybe established left writers and so on, because there is plenty of materials to deal with or work on. But definitely there is no beginning or end in terms of where we started or how far back. At the end of the day, you're dealing with what you can get. So we're working with materials we can get. For example, in the library, and that hasn't been digitized, you will see, I think 1939 or 1949, the doctoral dissertation of one of Africa's most prominent left scholars, public intellectual, political economist, Professor Escott Toyo. You would see his handwritten doctoral dissertation.
Wow.
On the table. If you walk into the archive, it's in a file bound there. So for us, and one of the things we hope,
I feel like that needs an armed guard next to it as well.
Yeah. So one of the things we hope to do is to encourage people as we move ahead, engaging the community where the library is, but also the broader Nigerian community, for people to send in materials like this. Because at the end of the day, you can't digitize, as lawyers will say, you can't put something on nothing. You can't digitize what you don't have. Mm-hmm. So it's not left for us to say we want to digitize things from 1900 or amalgamation in 1904. But if we have those materials, we would preserve them in the library, would also go ahead to digitize them. So one key aspect of this, and even for the millennials, young people, many of them may not be interested in this kind of materials, but maybe their parents, not many young Nigerians would have the same kind of interest. Maybe their parents who are in their 70s or 80s who fought the independence struggle, were very active in the politics of the First Republic and so on. The kind of things that interest young people, understandably so, is different from what interested their parents. But it would also be nice that if they come across some of these materials, they don't trash them. They don't pass these materials on to akara sellers or plantain sellers. They would value it to the extent that they know a place where these things can be preserved and so on. So if I may answer your question directly, we've not set a target for ourselves in terms, we're not limiting ourselves in terms of starting points. Mm-hmm. If we get materials from, the period that when Lagos was ceded to the British in 1864 or so, we will gladly preserve the material and then digitize it for the benefit of young scholars and researchers and activists and so on. And then of course, if we get materials from the present age, so even though for now we have authors, some of them late, like Bala Usman, Curtis Joseph, Escotoyo, Basi Ekubasi, we also have materials from those who are alive. Edwin Madunagu himself, who continues to write, even if not very often these days. Yoduje for itself, myself, Kayode, Komolafe, and some other. So we would go back and forth depending on the materials we have. Guys, BJ materials started from when the ones we have. Many of his materials he lost, when he moved out of the country and stored them somewhere. I think in Ghana must go back. By the time he returned to them, they had been eaten by termites. And thanks to Comrade Eddie, who kept copies of some of those materials. Comrade BJ is eternally grateful to Comrade Eddie. I remember, I don't know which of them told me the story now, that when Comrade Eddie, when BJ was mourning the loss of materials, and Comrade Eddie told him he had copies, duplicates of some of the materials, he was both so shocked and relieved at the same time. And he continues to write. So his new work up until the present will be up there. We'll also entertain the works of younger left scholars and activists, even though many in this generation, I mean, when Comrade D and BJ and KK started writing, many of them were in their 20s, 30s, at most early 40s, but you don't find much of that now. Not many of our comrades in that age bracket find it interesting or find time to write or contribute essays and articles on national issues and so on. But yeah, in promoting Solar, in doing the work we do at Solar, we also have it at the back of our mind. So whether it's how creative we are with the website in terms of access, ability to navigate it, and so on, we are conscious of the audience. We are conscious of the audience we're dealing with. So beyond the authors, as I mentioned, for example, we have different categories, whether it's the economy, sports, students movement, radical movement, politics and governance, media, labor, women's movement, women's health. So even if you are not interested in any of the authors, for young scholars, activists, journalists, citizens generally, we've also ensured that we have categories that would be of interest to them, so that if you are maybe a gender activist, you can find materials on women's health and the women's movements, not just in Nigeria, but also around the world. And hopefully the way this has been done would be of interest to everybody. In terms of the journals and magazines, whether International Socialist Review, Labor Review, the African Communists, some of these materials are out of print. But I said the idea of this library is to ensure that we are creative in the way we manage the process, but also ensuring that we carry everybody along.
Yeah.
What I mean by everybody is both the young and old, to ensure that the place becomes a platform for everybody, essentially. It doesn't matter, as long as you're seeking information, you're seeking knowledge, you're seeking materials, whether young or old, male, female, you can find something that is of interest to you.
If I could quickly follow up before Emeka comes back, another question that springs to mind, related to what you were just responding, is in terms of generations. I mean, we're already talking in generational terms. If you could kind of estimate, like, which of the generations of the left do you feel are probably, of the Nigerian left that is probably best represented in the collections? So I'm kind of thinking of Comrade BJ's piece on several, where he kind of profiled several generations of the left. And yeah, just from that point of view, I wonder which kind of those groupings has turned up more in larger numbers in terms of writings or other memorabilia in the collection so far.
Okay, so are you talking up in terms of what we have uploaded so far or what we have?
Because both would be interesting. So starting from what you have.
Okay, so we have quite a large number, but I think the way it's being processed is to, I mean, of course, for obvious reasons, the writings of Comrade Bene and Eddie,
yeah, sure,
Madunagu would form the majority of the materials, partly understandably so,
yeah, sure,
partly because this is their collection originally. So at everything they've written, we have, and also the long relationship that Comrade D and Comrade BJ have had for more than 5 decades, and the fact that also Comrade Eddie himself is a huge collector of materials. He's managed to keep those, and then writings of Comrade somebody like Comrade KK or myself. So yes, we have materials on different people. We said we have labor materials on Gani Fawemi, for example, materials on Femi Falana, and so on.
Okay.
But also materials on younger comrades who were active in the 80s and 90s. Okay. Many of those. So in some cases, I mean, in the case of somebody like Curtis Joseph, there was a deliberate transition. So his materials were formally handed over to Comrade Eddie, who has now handed them over to the library. In some cases, and that's one of the things we're encouraging for comrades to be able to hand over their materials, whether copies of those materials or the original materials, for example. Many of my own articles in the last 3 decades, what I've done really, maybe it's the journalist in me, I've been able to document them into book form.
Yeah.
And because of my movement from different places I've lived around the world, I have libraries, I have books and collections, but so I may not have immediate access to them. But some of the newspaper articles and essays I have in the last decades or so that are available, I moved them to Calabar during this last trip. Last month or so, I moved to Calabar. So one of the things we're hoping to do is to encourage some of our cadres, comrades on the left, to be able to provide the archives with materials, whether directly or duplicates of this material. So I probably can't reel out all the names we have now, but we have anything. We collect anything progressive literature, left literature by our comrades. So for some comrades, it may just be 2 or 3 or 4 essays or articles. So the idea now is to concentrate on those that have a lot of materials. And then we keep going down. Yeah, so the Bala, Usman, Basi, Ekobasi, Bene, Madunagu, who has Coyote. I think they will be, maybe later this month, they will be adding my own to the list, and other, yes.
Okay, yeah, so it sounds like there's kind of a 70s and 80s thing happening first.
Yes.
A sprinkle of the 60s and a sprinkle of the 90s so far. So yeah, I guess that's a challenge to the 2000s generation to step up.
Yeah, I think
I'm
it's
looking
also
particularly at Emeka, of course, but yeah, maybe some of the listeners.
it's also a lack of because I remember as teenagers and young students at the University of Calabar, we wanted to express ourselves. We strove to contribute to the Guardian. So I mean, you can't find that now. It will be difficult to find maybe some of these comrades in their late 20s, 30s, early 30s, and late 30s who are persistent or consistent in terms of saying, I want to, write essays from a left or progressive point of view, do the deep, and those materials are simply not there, which is also a problem because then I always want to talk about this. I say, and I echoed this during the birthday conversation organized by some young people that I'm eternally grateful to. A few days ago, I think on Tuesday. So if you go online and there is something on Bobrisky, for example, in 1 hour you get 20,000 comments or 50,000 comments. And then you write something about, do some analysis or try to invite young Nigerians to come and have a conversation about the country. Even in a platform, so you belong to several WhatsApp groups that you have people of like minds and people who show interest in public, and then you organize something. If you'll be lucky to get 20 or 30 people. I mean, when we did first when we did the library thing, I think we had a fairly good number, but of course, many of them maybe out of respect for Comrade Eddie and Bene 3 years ago. But was it later we had 1 year anniversary so we had close to 200 people on that single WhatsApp group. You'll be lucky if you can get 1/4 of that in a Zoom conversation. And you begin to wonder, these people belong to this platform. Is it that they are not interested or they don't believe in the ideals of this platform? So the challenge is, how do we get young people? Of course, the tragedy on the other side is that for some reason, and I don't know whether we have to be punished for that, we didn't manage to reproduce ourselves.
Right.
For many, I don't know. I have my own personal concerns and reason why that didn't happen. But these days, so you go to the university, the kind of characters you have in the student movement, the leadership of the student union government. I mean, at the University of Calabar, for example, we had the movement for progressive Nigeria, which was the background movement that literally ran the student union government. I was seconded from the MPN to go and contest in the student union movement until I was banned, and it was the movement for progressive Nigeria that put me up in 1989 to be part of the NANS leadership led by Opeyemi Bamidele at the convention at the University of Ife then.
Right.
You have these days, if maybe some of us heard about the situation, was it Bayero University, Kano? You have, so what you have, rather than being taking a counter position, what you find on campus these days mirrors exactly what is happening in society. So you have the bad leadership you have in society, then you look at the campuses, You have student union presidents, first office of the first lady, several PAs and SAs. They are going with their own security guards. They have people who are running. So the SUG president is driving to a venue on campus, and students like him, the same school, they are running side by side with him, just the way it's almost like a movie, like mirroring what's going on in society.
Yeah. So yeah.
They celebrate. So that's the challenge. The fact that there is a dearth of materials in terms of young people. How do we get young people to start writing, to start taking interest? Maybe it's one of the things that the library and archives would have to look into.
Yeah. No, I mean, it certainly helps to have materials to reference, so that you're not just writing in a vacuum. So, the existence of the library itself, I think, will help bridge some of that intellectual gap. And yeah, you've pointed out a generational gap as well that has various reasons why it's sprung up. That, is itself an interesting conversation to have separately. But I think that the library certainly sits in an interesting and strategic position to maybe intervene in a number of these areas. So in terms of kind of final questions, you were just talking about movements on campus, including the ones that you were part of. And we've talked about individuals that are represented in the archive and several generations of intellectuals that are also represented. So I wondered if maybe thinking in terms of movements might be another way to offer a kind of preview of the materials in the archive. So if you could just briefly maybe make reference to a few of the movements that you have already encountered in the archive, I think that would be quite interesting. So in terms of, movements that some of the comrades you spoke about were part of, but also, maybe some others that left a trace in writing or other memorabilia that has now turned up at the archive, and any kind of anecdotes, I suppose, about those movements would also be interesting.
Okay, so the library and archives has a broad attitude in terms of collections. So you have materials from the labor movement. Of course, some of the people have spoken about, whether it's Escotoyo or Biodu Jeyifo, who either were directly involved in this labor movement or tangentially involved, and therefore wrote articles or essays on the works and the activities of the movement. You have the Academic Staff Union of Universities.
Yeah, sure.
Some of the problems it had with the Obasanjo, so it wasn't asked to them, but just generally the academic staff, their union, then before, during, and after the Ali Mongo crisis of 1978. Both materials we have, and that's also the other thing, apart from the writings of some of the comrades here in reference to this movements or organization. There are also direct, whether it's press releases from NLC, press releases, ASU, and so on. Those materials have yet to be uploaded or digitized, but there are many of them: letters, correspondences, press releases, statements issued in reference to all the things going on in the country. You have materials from the National Association of Nigerian Students, for example. Interestingly, NANS has its origin in Calabar in 1980. The first president of NANS, Chris Mama, was a student at the University of Calabar. Actually, the struggle, the protest that started at Limongo, started at the University of Calabar.
Yeah.
The president then, he's a professor now, I think in the United States, who was the president of the student union government, working with the academic staff within and outside the country, were the ones that set the process in motion that led to the Alimongo crisis. So materials like
Ophion Aqua at one point in the podcast about that, actually. So
so materials like that exist. Then materials from different socialist formation was Socialist Congress of Nigeria, different socialist labor trade union, the TUC, the NLC, organize different. Then of course you have even within Cross River States the Calabar, what's that now, group of socialists. You have anti-poverty movement. These are some of the organizations Comrade Chido and Bene formed or belongs to at different stage in the political evolution of the country. So you have those materials. Many of them said are statements. Some of them even now may be too sensitive to put out online, but you have materials from these groups, the different formations that were put in place against the Babangida dictatorship, against the dictatorship of General Sani Abacha, and even going back as far back as during the post-Civil War era. Comrade Eddie himself was detained several times. The Gowon administration moved around the country in different prison locations and so on. So we're also not shy about documenting those things, whether they relate directly to the left cause or tangentially, if there are progressive materials that deal with the issue of whether it's unemployment, for example, or poverty or illiteracy. So on anything that seeks to advance the betterment of Nigerians or good governance in terms that would ultimately benefit the masses. It's something that's been of interest to the Madunagus, and we have a lot of those collections, and hopefully in the coming days and months, we should be able to put out some of these materials for the benefit of the public.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Comrade. I suppose a final question would be in terms of access. So for people who are just encountering this idea of a socialist library and archive in Nigeria for the first time, how can they actually access things? Is the library already open for the public? Do they need to register in some way or pay a fee of some sort? Or what are the
so now the library is open to the public to the extent that it's a free access. You can go online and download materials. One of the things we discussed during the last meeting, workshop we had in Calabar last month, was also to be able to see how to improve access, make it easy, make the website user-friendly, how to improve access, also get feedback, if possible, from people and see what they are getting, what they need, what they would like to get that is not already there. But ultimately, the idea is to, if we are going to commercialize, in quotes, it will not be, so maybe if, for example, people need materials that are not there, and you replace them, they may digitize and then charge you for the cost of whatever.
Yeah, sure.
And send. But in terms of the materials that are available online, the idea is to make them as free as possible so that people can just download, not just free, but easy to access and download for their own use. Of course, we are constrained by a number of factors. The question of copyright, you also have to be careful and so on, because then once you put those materials out there, people can then use those materials without bothering about copyright violations. So yeah, we seek and would hope that we would eventually. The idea is to put as many materials as we can online and make these materials available for those who, in terms of navigating the website, as I said, it's work in progress. We're improving and making sure that we get to the stage where wherever you are around the world, you are able to access the platform and get whatever it is you need. You use from the website. And then if there are some materials that are not on the website, but also then to create avenues or platform to seek those materials, and they could be sent to the individuals who need them.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, we will definitely leave links to the website itself and to some of the articles we've referenced in the discussion in this podcast notes. Comrade, let me say a huge thank you for making time to join us. America might have a more elaborate vote of thanks, but I can just register my appreciation for you making the time and also for the amazing work happening in Calabar under your stewardship. So thank you very much again.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure, and we're really looking forward to opportunities like this to promote the work we do.
Well, yeah, we might be losing the war against the ruling class and capital, but we are at least winning the war against termites for now. So I think
Exactly.
We can add this to the list.
When rats and cockroaches descend on your book and materials.
Oh God, yeah. The least we can do, I suppose, is resist. Great. Okay, so let's leave it there then. I guess.
Thank you very much, Comrade.
Yeah, absolutely.